And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up, right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H, and I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Hey, Peter, it's good as always to do Glove Up or Shut Up with you, and we've got a very newsworthy episode this week, and joining us for the discussion is our good friend Frank Vaughn, aka Nikes the Sneaker Pimp.
Hello. This is Frank Vaughn from Little Rock, Arkansas, by way of Dorado, Puerto Rico.
Holy smokes, you're in Puerto Rico right now?
I am in Puerto Rico. This is where I live and up or shut up for the very first time. It's interesting. I've been with the Angry Marks for the last, 10 years or so, but this is my first MMA show.
I wish I was in Puerto Rico right now, Frank. We just got 4 inches of snow last night.
Brother, I've got 4 inches of 91 degrees Fahrenheit here, so...
Oh, you guys are don't talk about snow, Stevie. I'm in Canada, and there's no way.
Well, I've had over a foot in the last 2 days, so...
Eesh, that's bad news. I tell you what, though, I just left New Jersey last night, so I got a little taste of the snow over the last month or so while I was waiting for my son to be born.
That's very true. You got hammered on the East Coast if you were anywhere in New Jersey or New England, so...
Yes, sir.
All right, well, Peter, why don't you lead us off on the big news that broke last night about UFC 183?
Well, there's no easy way to say this, but from the first time that I can recall, and I've seen my fair share of MMA fights over the years, the main event of Diaz and Silva, the first time I can recall the main event fighters, both fighters, failing drug tests post-fight. I mean, I'll just read the stuff here, and then we'll get Stevie and Frank's opinions on this, but Anderson Silva, will do him first. He failed an out-of-competition test on January the 9th. The results just came back on February 3rd. He failed for drostanolone metabolites, which is an indication of steroids, and also androsterone, which is a testosterone. There was a second test taken on January the 18th. We're still waiting on those results. And Anderson Silva said in October, anyone who tests positive for steroids should be facing a lifetime ban, so, oops. Also, according to the Nevada State Athletic Commission, the first time steroid test usually means a 9-month ban. And Nick Diaz, he failed the post-fight test for marijuana. Here's the scary thing. It's his third strike with Nevada. He failed back for Pride 33 in a fight against Takanori Gomi, and failed again at UFC 143 in his fight with Carlos Condit. And the limit was just raised from 50 nanograms to 150 nanograms, and he still failed. So, there's a disciplinary hearing in February 17th, but that one will just give him the temporary suspensions. The one, I believe, in March or April, that's the one where they're really going to hit the hammer down. So, Stevie, we'll start with you. Wow, what do you take away from this?
Well, it's pretty ridiculous that both of the main eventers failed for UFC 183, and it's also a little bit suspicious that Anderson Silva's failure was taken from a test weeks before the event, and they still didn't have the results of that test back in time for him to be bumped from the fight, because the Nevada State Athletic Commission has outright said if we had known he was going to fail this test for steroids, we would have never allowed him to fight. Well, how could they have not had the results back in time to know that? What transpired that there was that much of a delay if you tested him weeks before the fight took place? Nick Diaz failing for pot ain't no surprise to anybody by now. But Anderson Silva failing for steroids, and the test was taken weeks ahead of time, how they didn't have those results raises all kinds of flags.
Frank, your thoughts?
Well, Stevie focused on the Nevada State Athletic Commission and UFC. I'm going to focus on Anderson Silva here. This guy is widely considered the greatest of all time in mixed martial arts. Now, we all know what happened to him against Chris Weidman, snapping his leg in half, and then before that he got caught showboating and got knocked out. So people want to look at the results of those two fights as outliers, but now all of a sudden we catch him not just doing drugs, but literally cheating to win this fight. Literally cheating to win this fight. Now, here's my thing. Marijuana is not a performance enhancer, okay? Now, I'm not a drug legalization guy or anything like that, but I'm looking at the fact that Nick Diaz was smoking pot. That is a drug that kills your incentive. That's a drug that impedes your ability to compete in things like this, okay? So you've got Anderson Silva using performance-enhancing drugs, and you've got Nick Diaz using things that impede your ability to perform. And, I mean, the most immediate thought that I have about this is, now I understand why Anderson Silva wasn't ready to commit to sticking around after this fight.
No, you got a point there. He was very, I hate to see this word, but he was very wacky during the fight as well. I mean, he was daring Anderson Silva to fight him, because we know Silva's a counter puncher, right? So, it's one of those things where Diaz knew he wasn't going to fall for that trap. So he's like, come on, take the first shot. I'm giving you the first shot. And basically at one point laid down in the cage, which you would never think a fighter would do in any mixed martial arts contest. And he wasn't, like, he was daring. He was that trash talker we've seen in the past, but he took it to the next level to the point where the announcers were both laughing at one point. It was ridiculous. And his attitude post-fight at the press conference, I don't know, man. It was weird, and I don't know what you do with him now, because he's going to be facing a third strike, which could mean the end of him getting a license in Nevada, which means he probably won't be able to fight anywhere outside of Indian Reservation.
Here's what I think should happen. I think the UFC should lose any ability to do events in Nevada for at least 9 months. I think we punish the organization here, along with the fighters, because let's look at this for a minute. Anderson Silva, like I said, is widely considered the greatest of all time. Now it's tempting to go, well, okay, he's a steroid guy, so we have to remove him from that slot and move the next guy up. Well, unfortunately for all of us, the next guy up is a cokehead.
Well, he did say after the fight to John Jones, you're the greatest fighter now. And it's like, ooh, those are, one's out for coke and one's out for steroids. I don't know how great that is.
Well, when you got John Jones out for coke, you've got Anderson Silva caught with steroids, you've got Nick Diaz smoking pot, going all Rob Van Dam here. Then you've got, Vitor Belfort and his issues, Chael Sonnen and his testosterone replacement issues. This is not like isolated incidents. We've got a problem here across this organization, and I think it's time Dana White be held responsible for some of this.
I think what we've got going on is the fact that this sport has always had people looking to gain a competitive edge, and the only reason more people haven't been caught before now is more testing hasn't been done before now. The more increases we see in testing, the more out of competition and random testing there is, the more guys that are going to get popped, because guys who used to get away with stuff by saying, I can stop taking it before the fight because they'll test me after the fight, can't get away with it anymore because they're taking it well ahead of the fight, and the test is occurring well ahead of the fight, so they're getting caught.
Well, and you have Anderson Silva playing the cycle up, cycle down game, and he obviously got caught, miscalculating or something. I don't know. But there's something even deeper about this that troubles me regarding Anderson Silva. And that is, as Peter mentioned before, he talked last fall about how people who get caught using steroids should be banned for life. But as recently as Monday? He was caught in an interview saying that while John Jones is the greatest fighter and there's no questioning his talent in the octagon, he really needs to become more responsible and step up and be a better example for his fans. And then the next day we find out this guy's juicing.
There is hypocrisy there, but I don't think that's really surprising that Anderson Silva would be hypocritical about this, because he probably thought he had cycled down and was never going to get caught and didn't believe that he was saying anything that would reflect badly on him. He had no way of knowing this test would come back positive. And his son is already on the record. Khalil is denying that there's even a real test. He's calling it a rumor. So there's a lot of hypocrisy and self-delusion in the Silva family that nobody wants to believe this is anything that could ever happen to the legend Anderson Silva.
Now, if I can jump in for just a second, I just got a note right now, and we're talking about contact sports, mixed martial arts. The World Boxing Association has stripped Luis Ortiz of the interim heavyweight title for nandrolone. He tested positive and he'll be suspended for 8 months from the day of the fight. So even in boxing, we're having a problem this week of steroid use, in this case, stripping of an interim heavyweight championship. So right. It's crazy. It's just crazy this week. It's insane.
I'm sorry. Steroids have been illegal since, forever, okay? And people have been getting popped for steroids. And here's what cracks me up about this. We went through the whole steroid scandal in the 90s in WWE, okay? A fake sport, if you will. Then the Chris Benoit thing happened in 2007, and everybody blamed that on steroids, and there may be some validity to that. But now I'm looking at UFC, and I'm like, hold on a second. Do we have to have a Chris Benoit-like event before somebody stands up? Oh, wait a minute. We sort of already did. Anybody remember War Machine last year? Something needs to be done about this from the top down. Okay, so you punish the fighters, and that's appropriate. That should happen because these idiots know better than to do this. Anderson Silva is not only the best fighter in the game, he's also supposed to be the most cerebral fighter in MMA, and he was stupid enough to get caught juicing. That guy? Anderson Silva may be alive and well right now, but the hero we all knew and loved is dead.
I guess I wonder if he wasn't necessarily doing this all along and just never getting caught before now, because again, I point out the increased amount of testing they're doing. They're trying to clean up the sport. I know you say it's got to be from the top down, but testing is expensive. They had to get the funding for it, and they had to commit to spending the funding on it. And now that they are, and now that they do it more often and more guys are getting caught, it makes you wonder, was Anderson Silva doing this all along and just never getting caught because they weren't testing him out of competition?
Yeah, but here's my question to you, Steve. Is Dana White ordering these tests, or are the state athletic commissions ordering them?
It's a little of column A and a little of column B. Dana White wants more testing done. The Nevada State Athletic Commission does a certain amount of testing. They both need to come to the table and agree that there should be year-round mandatory testing, that any fighter, whether he's in a fight or not, if he's licensed, can be tested at any time. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a fight upcoming or not. If they show up at your house with a bag and a bottle and say, take a sample, go in the bathroom and give it back to us, then you should do it. That's how they clean up Olympic sports. They should have that in mixed martial arts.
Well, and there's something else regarding Silva. He just came back from a massive injury, okay? And we all know enough to know that steroids are sometimes prescribed to help overcome drastic injuries, okay? I mean, I'm fairly certain there was a good reason John Cena came back from a year-long injury after only 4 months when he tore his pectoral muscle, okay? Probably because he had some help, and it was probably legal and prescribed and all of that. That's fine. But sometimes these guys fall in love with what steroids makes them do while they're injured, and they forget to stop after they're well again.
That's true. It's very possible that he was using it for recovery purposes and then just benefiting from it. But as Peter will attest, and I'll throw it to him on this, Anderson Silva wasn't exactly looking ripped up for that fight. He looked like he was healthy, maybe a little bit pudgier than when we'd seen him the last time, but that was what you'd expect for a 40-year-old guy who just came back from a broken leg injury. He didn't come in there looking jacked up like a super freak. He didn't have like the Vitor Belfort, type of physique where people would look at that and go, the guy's juicing.
No, I mean, we're going to talk about Vitor Belfort later on in the show, but he did not look like Kung Lee at his last fight against Michael Bisping.
No, he didn't have the Kung Lee, the Vitor Belfort physique. He didn't have, the physique that basically when, you look at a guy and just go, there's no way, no amount of working out, no amount of weight training could get you in that shape.
No, and it's one of those issues where you said these guys would be tested year long. It's the out of competition testing they've been increasing. Dana White called for that months ago, and 10 months later, we're looking at John Jones getting popped for out of competition. We're getting Anderson Silva getting popped for a test, but the result's not coming back for a month. I mean, there's something fishy there. I'm not sure what it is, if it's the lab, if the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, who's being tested and when. They should sync up, okay, I'm getting my license on March the 1st. As of March 1st, I can't have anything in my system, so maybe not do a drug. How about being drug-free and being straight edge? I don't know. It's one of those things where Frank said, cycle on, cycle off. Maybe we should they should realize that at the end of the day, when you're in your mid-30s, early 40s, cycling on, cycling off is more detrimental to your health than helping you at this point.
Or how about this? How about if you're old enough that you can't do this anymore without cheating, that you just consider retiring?
Yeah, like the old argument I made about testosterone replacement therapy. If you need medicinal therapeutic testosterone to be able to fight, then maybe you shouldn't be fighting. Maybe that's just God's way of telling you you're not a fighter anymore. This is over for you.
I mean, I'm in total agreement on that. Anderson Silva, really? John Jones, really? I mean, okay, so Vitor Belfort, he's a good fighter and all that, but he's nobody's pick for pound king. I'm just looking at these two guys, legends of the sport. Anderson Silva's a legend, and John Jones is a legend in the making, and these are the two guys that get popped. Really?
Well, in a way, Nick Diaz is a legend too. I mean, maybe he's a legend for his antics, but he's definitely one of the most famous or infamous fighters of all time. And you've got his coach, Cesar Gracie, blowing this off like, here's an actual quote. His DNA is THC. No one is surprised by it. It's just a distraction. I don't want any distractions. The guy is a brilliant fighter. I'd rather be talking about how skilled he is. Well, then get him to put the bong down.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the THC thing, and I used to work in juvenile justice, and I had to do drug tests on my clients every week. And we had this system where I would have them pee in a cup, and then I had a little indicator that I would dip into the pee, and within 4 seconds I knew if they were hot for THC. Why did it take us a month to get that result back?
Oh, no. This isn't a month result. The Diaz result is the post-fight drug test. He failed immediately after the fight. The one that's taken a month is Anderson Silva.
Okay, now it is worth noting that when you smoke marijuana, it stays in your system for at least 30 days, whereas most drugs are gone within a week.
Right, the metabolites stick around for a while. So he could have been toking up a month ago and still tested positive now, but the test he failed is the post-fight piss test, either way.
All right, well, that's something anyway. But, yeah, I mean, when I say that the whole organization needs to be taken to task for this, it's largely because, first of all, it took a long time to get John Jones's results back. It's taken a long time to get Anderson Silva's results back. Now the question is being asked, who knew what and when? Okay, why did these guys get to fight if they were guilty of this? Now, in John Jones's case, on a technicality, he still would have been able to fight anyway because, surprisingly, cocaine is not on the out-of-competition banned list. I don't know why it's not, but it's not.
Well, it's considered recreational as opposed to performance-enhancing.
Even though it's illegal as hell.
Of course. Nobody in this world disputes the fact that it was completely illegal, but it wasn't performance-enhancing, at least according to the athletic commission that judges this.
Right, but, I mean, I would at least, to address John Jones's issue, if I were the UFC, I would at least consider adding to our organizational ban list anything that's going to land somebody behind bars.
Yeah, and Peter and I have both agreed on that here on the show. We've said outright, if it's not legal to take it, it shouldn't matter whether it enhances your fight career or not. If you took something illegal, that's a flagged substance no matter what.
Yeah, because do you really want somebody in the ring who just snorted blow right before the fight? I mean, they could either hurt themselves or somebody else.
Well, now that could actually be considered performance enhancing. If you're taking it the day of the fight or right before you go on the fight and you get popped afterward in the post-fight drug screen, then that's going to be clearly a performance enhancing drug at that point.
Right, but you could also argue that it would enhance your training regimen too, wouldn't it?
Well, that's sort of the argument for THC being banned, is that pot makes it easier to fight because you feel less pain and you're more flexible, which is why they consider it performance enhancing. I know this is dumb as fuck. I am not saying I justify this argument, but that's why THC and pot are considered to be illegal, because they enhance your career as a fighter.
Right, so, and I'm also concerned about the UFC's response to all of this. John Jones takes a drug test, 2, 3, 4 weeks before his fight, and then we find out the day after the fight that he was hot for cocaine, and Dana White's all, what? Really? I didn't know that.
And Deja freaking vu that the same thing happens with Anderson Silva. He's tested a month out, and we find out the day after the fight. It's really starting to look bad for UFC. I'm not saying they did this on purpose, but when Dana White comes back in an interview yesterday and says, we're going to put a speed rush on all of these drug tests from now on. It's like, you didn't think about that after the John Jones debacle? Why didn't it occur to you then?
Yeah.
Now, social media has really taken this, like, a lot of people are surprised at Anderson Silva, and a lot of people are making jokes at Diaz's expense for getting popped. I saw one where they said, thank God Doritos wasn't a sponsor on the cage for this fight.
Man.
But there was an interesting stat, and I just saw this here. To find a UFC pay-per-view where no fighters got caught with drugs, you have to go back to UFC 180 in November in Mexico City.
Okay, so you're talking 3 months ago.
Yeah, 3 months of at least one person failing for drugs. Like, that's come on, man.
I could have sworn somebody got popped on UFC 180 too, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, to find a show that somebody didn't get popped, you have to go back to November. Ever since the New Mexico show, every pay-per-view has had a drug failure.
Oh, so you're saying including UFC 180, each one has
Yes.
had it. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now I understand.
Yeah.
Now, here's what I would propose. Okay, I don't know what Zuffa wants to do with Dana White. That's between them, whatever. But in terms of these fighters, honestly, I am a proponent of taking a hard line stance on this. If you get popped for drugs, you're automatically suspended for 1 year. You get popped twice, you're done. That's me.
We were just talking about that off the air too, and the general consensus between Peter and I, based on what we've seen with the commission, is that first offense is 6 or 9 months, second offense is a year, third offense can be more than that or a lifetime ban. So they are definitely giving fighters multiple strikes, whereas you're saying, Frank, they probably shouldn't be doing that at all.
No, I honest to God think, I'm all about redemption one time, okay? It's the old do it to me once, shame on you. Do it to me twice, shame on me. So I'm all about, giving them one chance if they pop hot. John Jones, he's the biggest name in the sport, not just this organization, but the entire sport right now, okay? So he popped hot for cocaine. Now, again, with him, technically you can't do anything because it's not on the banned list. But it should be on the banned list from now on, and if he's ever caught doing it again, 1 year suspension, and he gets stripped of his title.
At least they fined him.
Doesn't expire.
Yeah, at least they did fine him $50,000, which Peter...
That was a slap on the wrist.
I know,
Come on,
you and I both agree that's a drop in the bucket and a slap on the wrist, but
I thought they fined him $25,000.
No, it was 50, but he got paid out $400,000 just for beating Daniel Cormier. So,
well, actually, that's kind of a story in this case too, because Anderson Silva could lose half his purse plus his fight bonus. So he's going from like an $800,000 payday to $420,000. That's more than a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, he's prepared to walk away from the sport and never get paid again. So I doubt that he's going to go broke over this.
Probably not, but it's just that at least is a fine that has some teeth in it. When you're losing almost $500,000, that feels like something for a fighter.
But wasn't John Jones and Daniel Cormier the fight of the night at that pay-per-view?
Yeah, and you lose your fight of the night bonus if you get popped for anything, which is what I'm talking about.
And that's all they did to him. They took his fight of the night bonus. He still got his $800,000 or whatever the hell it was they paid him, with his guarantees and whatever. So, I mean, the guy made, a killing off of this fight, and all they ended up taking from him was, the spare change in his couch cushion.
Yeah, well, that's why Peter was saying it was a slap on the wrist for John Jones, because he's still got a cut of the pay-per-view, too, on top of whatever his fight purse was.
Can I have that couch?
Yeah, I think we'd all like that couch, right?
And I saw something online, I think, where they estimated his total payout for the pay-per-view, including his guarantee on the back end of the pay-per-view, was something like $1.2 million.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and he gets a $50,000 fine. Oh, and he went to rehab for like 4 hours.
Yeah, less than a day.
So
No, but he had to go to the AFC title game, so
glad to see he's taking that seriously.
Well, if we're going to take it seriously, the whole sport needs to change. And not just UFC, not just the Athletic Commission, but the fighters themselves need to change. The whole mentality needs to change, that it's something I can get away with until I get caught. Everybody just needs to decide, if I'm going to be a professional fighter, I got to be the best athlete I can be without any additional help. And if I can't get there, if I can't be competitive, if I'm not naturally a good enough athlete, or I can't work hard enough to achieve it, then I'm just going to have to pick something else to do for a living, because I'm not cut out to be a fighter. Because not everybody on this earth was meant to be.
Right. Now, and Peter brought up a good point a minute ago. The last 3 or 4 pay-per-views in a row, this has been a problem, okay? What that speaks to me is a culture issue.
Exactly.
There's a culture issue within this. So here's what I would do if I were Zuffa, okay? I would call Dana White into the office and say, listen, Mr. President, you have 1 year to eradicate this culture. I'm not saying that nobody ever gets popped again, but you've got 1 year to radically change the culture of this within our business, or you're fired.
I think it's more than just the culture of UFC, though. I think it's more the culture of competitive, high-level, boxing, mixed martial arts, combat sports, even professional football, basketball, anything where you have to be at a really high level and really good to make millions of dollars. I think this is endemic of professional sports in general, that guys think, I'm going to get away with it because I'm getting paid millions of dollars, and if I get fined or if I get caught, I'm still making millions anyway.
Got it. But let's look at what other sports have done about this, okay? Alex Rodriguez has spent the last over a year on the shelf now because of his steroid issues, okay? And by the way, that was the second time he'd been popped, okay? The NFL has a structure where they suspend people. I think it's six months or 6 games for the first violation, and then it's a whole season the second time, and then the third time it's a lifetime ban. So baseball and football have this covered. I don't know that we've really had much of a drug culture problem in the NBA, but even the WWE has a wellness policy that admittedly they sometimes selectively apply, but even they at least have one. Okay? And they're not even a real sport.
I think with hockey as well, it's, if you're speaking about drugs, I don't think like hardcore drug use is rampant in the NHL, but I do know of a few players back in the day who, alcohol was a big issue, and we had 1 or 2 people on cocaine, what have you, that got arrested and caught, but I think more prevalent use is abuse of alcohol in the NHL, but if you're talking major sports.
Well, and they just suspended an NFL player for a year for drinking. They, you know what? They've got a no tolerance policy that if you've already failed for something else and we tell you not to drink and you do it, you can be suspended for a full year and lose your whole season.
Well, he got arrested for a DUI. That's why he can't drink for a year, and he got popped for drinking. It's, part of your probation. You can't drink for a year. Hey,
right, but that was
surprise test.
That wasn't even his police probation. That was his NFL probation. Their attitude was, you don't take 1 drop of anything ever. You don't even have a near beer. Nothing.
Yeah. But here we have the UFC that's been around since 93?
Yeah, 20 years and change. Yeah. We're going on over 20 years now.
Yeah, we're over 20 years now, and John Jones gets popped for cocaine out of competition, and everybody's scratching their heads going, well, geez, what do we do with this? I know, let's fine him $50,000 and wag our finger at him and threaten him never to do it again. And then Anderson Silva gets popped for steroids, and it's like, what do we do about that? And then before that, it was Vitor Belfort, and Chael Sonnen had issues with testosterone replacement. They don't have a plan for this. They're reacting as it happens, and it's happening more and more.
Well, on that note, I have a denial from Anderson Silva's doctor and apparently from Anderson Silva himself. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
From MMA Fighting, and this is a statement from Silva's doctor, Marcio Tenori. Quote, Anderson told me he's disappointed, upset because he didn't use steroids. He will ask for the confirmation test because he believes the only explanation is contamination or a mistake from the lab. He told me I have an impeccable career history and I wouldn't want to tarnish my image, quote unquote. So he's saying the test is wrong.
Okay, well, Michael Jackson's doctor claimed he didn't kill him either. So, are doctors always telling the truth?
No, I don't think you can buy the doctor here. And frankly, that's why they have an A and a B sample, because if the A comes back positive, they test the B. And if the B comes back positive, that proves it.
But what if it comes back negative?
Well, then he's got a right to appeal any suspension. If it does come back negative, then he's got a case. But if it doesn't, then he's boned.
Well, if the A sample tests positive and the B does not, then the A sample's invalid, and he walks. That's how that works. Okay, that's what we do in the military also. Anderson Silva claims he didn't do it. His doctor's backing him up, but guys, his piss is saying another story. His piss disagrees with him.
Couldn't put it better than that, Frank. I think that puts a pin in it right there. The piss disagrees with him.
Yeah, so, that's all I know to say about that.
All right, Peter, let's move on then. What else are we going to talk about?
Well, let's see. UFC 183. I'll talk about we'll cover the card in a second. I just want to get the news out of the way, then we'll wrap the show up with discussion over the fights there. Actually, I'm going to push off the UFC 183 news because it kind of ties in with the winners and losers. So we'll just skip that one for now. World Series of Fighting, 18 February the 12th. Cody McKenzie's been added to the card. He's going to be headlining the prelim portion. He's fighting Andrew McGuinness, and the main event will be a bantamweight title fight between Marlon Moraes and Josh Hill.
Yep, and I just interviewed Josh Hill yesterday, so hopefully you had a chance to check that out.
UFC Fight Night 60 on Valentine's Day. There's some interesting changes to that card as Levin Makashvili will be replacing Thiago Tavares and will be fighting Nick Lentz in his UFC debut. So Tavares is out and Lentz has a new opponent.
All right.
And Frank, I don't know if you're familiar with this one, but Benson Henderson will be fighting on February the 14th as well. He's going to be replacing Stephen Thompson. So it's Benson Henderson against Brendan Thatch, but here's the kicker. It's at welterweight. Henderson's first fight at welterweight.
Yeah, I saw that, and Benson Henderson is I guess he thinks he's Cowboy Cerrone and he can just turn around like this and fight again. I'm surprised that Cowboy Cerrone thought he was Cowboy Cerrone and did that. I mean, let me ask this question about that, okay? Are they taking fights when they shouldn't be taking them, or are the training camps too long for the fights for people that go through the normal process for this?
Well, I think it comes down to how much damage he took in his last fight. Okay, are you good to go if we give you 4 weeks? Are you good to go for another fight? It all depends on the fighters' bodies, right? Some fighters can go back to back to back, depending on what damage they suffered. If they were in a fight that lasted all of 2 minutes, then yeah, they can fight again sooner than later. But he was in a war against Donald Cerrone, but that fight was, okay, maybe war wasn't the best way. I felt more like a sparring session. Stevie, you can back me up on that one.
Yeah, he didn't look like he took a lot of damage, but this is still a huge risk for him because he lost that fight, and now he's going up in weight class and taking it on a few weeks' notice to potentially lose another fight. I feel like Benson Henderson is doing himself a disservice here, and I said the same thing about Cerrone, and Cerrone actually won both of his fights, so bully for Cerrone, but if Henderson loses 2 in a row on short notice, then he has really made a major step backward in his career.
Well, but here's the thing, though, Steve, and I don't, I mean, I'm sure you guys talked about this in a previous episode, but I mean, I saw the Cerrone-Henderson fight, and I didn't agree with decision in that fight, okay? I mean, it was close enough that maybe it could have gone either way, but I really thought Henderson did more in that fight and should have won. So my fear for him is that he's taking this on a dare because he wants to get that one back. And I just think, especially if you're going to change weight classes, that really needs to be a calculated move. And, I mean, here's the thing about this. The reason I asked that question a minute ago isn't because of conditioning. Okay, clearly if you're a top-notch fighter and you didn't take a lot of damage, then you should still be in good enough physical condition to fight again the next week if necessary. But so much of training camp is also about strategy and about training for a specific fighter and working on certain skills that you know you're going to need in that particular fight. And when these guys take these fights back-to-back, particularly with Benson Henderson moving up in weight class, I just don't know that he's going to be ready for what he's going to face in that next fight.
I agree.
I think it comes down to what his walk-around weight is. If he's a natural welterweight, maybe it won't be that much of an effect.
But will he have the time to work on the skills he needs for that particular fighter?
Well, I mean, his opponent isn't, I don't think he's in the top 15, so I don't think he has to worry about matching skill sets. I think when he fights Brendan Thatch, it's going to be an interesting contest, but you got to think Henderson's the favorite.
Okay, so this really is just about getting that loss back then, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, is there really a good reason for him to take this fight? Like, does it help his career? I mean, if he's fighting somebody who's outside the top 15, why is he doing this? This doesn't benefit him.
I'm not going to say it's a squash match because in mixed martial arts, there's really, once that gate closes and the referee says go, you're on, so... he's not ranked, but I mean, he could definitely pull off an upset and knock out Henderson, or be like, go back to lightweight.
Yeah, I mean, we are living in a world where one punch can end any fighter's night, regardless of who they are.
Let's see. Okay, so this is the story I gotta do. So I gotta talk about this one for a second because this is there's a lot here. Chris Weidman is off the card at UFC 184 February 28th due to a rib injury. Vitor Belfort wanted it. Okay, this is how the story translates into. Belfort wanted he wanted an interim title fight. Dana White said, okay, we'll call Lyoto Machida. Machida got the call, and when Dana started saying, look, we have a fight, we need you to fight Belfort for the interim title, Lyoto just said, done, I'm in. Send the paperwork. So they go back to Belfort. Belfort goes, ooh, Machida said yes. Ooh, I'll wait for the champ to come back. It's okay. So Dana's like, okay, well, we'll try Mousasi. Mousasi said, I'll check with my coaches. I'll get back to you in 24 hours. He comes back, yeah. If Machida says no, I'll take it. So they go back to Belfort. Belfort goes, no, I'm gonna turn that fight down too. Then Belfort went on Instagram with a huge paragraph rant about this, saying he wants to fight for the full title, not an interim title. He wants to do it with an 8-week fight camp, and there is some time because Weidman hasn't defended the title since July, so he has some time. After a year, if you haven't defended your title, I could make the argument for stripping somebody, but not under a year. That's ridiculous. Weidman's responded to this in an interview, calling Belfort, quote, a 2-time juice head. So.
Well, first of all, he is not actually inaccurate about that.
No, he's been popped for drugs before. So, Stevie, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, he's not the only one who's been popped multiple times. So, Alistair Overeem, anybody?
Yeah.
It's horse meat, I swear.
Right.
Yeah.
There are so many layers to this that I don't even know how to unpack this. Vitor Belfort wants the real champ and not to fight for an interim title. First of all, he's clearly not thinking like a businessman here. You win the interim title, you get the payout for that, and then you get a unification match later on and get the payout for that. He wants to skip one payout to get another?
Well, the problem with Belfort and with Silva, I mean, looking at Silva, if he gets suspended for 9 months, he'll be turning 40 in April. So you got a 40-year-old fighter there. With Belfort, he's in the same type of age range where it's like, I don't think he has time to waste on a fight if he wants to fight for the full title. And you could make the argument he's been sitting on that number one contendership for a while now because of injuries. So not by him, but by his opponents. So he's getting angry, he's getting frustrated, and maybe there is some credence to it, but a rib injury isn't as bad as like a knee injury, for example. So I think him waiting until, I don't know, if he's not good to go by July, then maybe you revisit this. But I think the champ will be back by July, easy.
Well, the champ is the one that's sitting in the catbird seat here. Okay, he doesn't have to fight until July if he doesn't want to, and nobody's going to make him. And he doesn't. Honestly, what does he care whether there's an interim champion or not? He still has the real belt, and like I said, there's going to be a massive payout for the unification match later on, and probably more pay-per-view buys if they have the right story to go with it, okay? But from Vitor Belfort's point of view, I don't get it. I mean, fight, dude. That's what you do. That's what you are. And now you're refusing to do it because you can't have it the way you want it? When did the UFC turn into Burger King?
It's not the first guy that's done that, though. There are a lot of fighters out there that feel like they are risking a lot if they go in there and take a fight where it's not for what they wanted. So unless they can get out of the fight what they want to, they're putting in a big training camp. They're taking a lot of physical risk in the cage, and of course the prestige risk of losing and dropping down in the rankings, which is now going to be directly tied to your sponsorship money from Reebok. So there's a lot to lose if you take a fight that's not for the title and it doesn't go your way.
That's what makes me respect guys like Donald Cerrone even more. I love what Joe Rogan said about him. He said, Cerrone's the kind of guy that you can call him up at 2 a.m. and tell him he's got a fight in 20 minutes, and he'll be there in 10.
Yeah. Well, not everybody's Donald Cerrone. There's very few guys that are like that, actually. He's kind of
the Miller brothers.
The Miller brothers and Donald Cerrone are rare breeds in the sport and in any sport.
I mean, and that's the extreme end of that, but it's at minimum, if it's your turn to fight, you fight. Okay? You
now,
just do
interesting on that card as well, they've bumped up a couple of fights. The Rousey-Zingano fight is now the main event, and Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington is your co-main event. So, co-main and main are women's fights. Something you wouldn't have heard of a few years ago.
And I think this is going to be the proving ground for whether or not Ronda Rousey is a draw, because every other time they've done a good buy rate with Rousey on a pay-per-view, she's been a title fight that's been supported by another big fight with a couple of men. So this time, if she does over 500,000 buys for this pay-per-view, they can't say that she's not a draw anymore. They can say that she is the kind of fighter that puts butts in seats.
Now, having said that, Steve, do you believe that Ronda Rousey is enough of a draw to get 500,000 buys?
I think if they do a hype video special, a countdown special, some profile packages, and they tell Kat Zingano's story pretty well, that they point out that this has been a long time coming for Zingano, and she's probably the most dangerous fighter that Rousey has ever faced, I can see them getting to 5. I don't see them getting to 1 million, but I think they can get to 5.
Steve, I heard this about Rousey's last opponent. She's the most dangerous opponent that Rousey's ever faced. This could be the one to get Rousey, and the fight was over in 16 seconds.
I know, I was there.
16 seconds. And that's the problem with Ronda Rousey being a draw. It's not because she doesn't deserve to be one, and it's not because she isn't talented enough to be one or charismatic enough. It's that her last 2 fights have ended in a combined 82 seconds.
Okay, but at the same time, everybody didn't expect those results to be what they were. And the fact is that the one person that everybody thought she would beat completely easily and dominate actually lasted 3 rounds with her in a rematch, and that was Miesha Tate. So I don't think we can put any expectations on Kat Zingano other than to say this is one of the best women's athletes in the world other than Ronda Rousey. And she's got discipline because she's military, and you can attest to this, Frank. That means she won't back down from anything.
Well, but the thing is you're right. Nobody expected her, the one fight to go 66 seconds, and nobody expected the other one to go 16, okay? But now that that's happened 2 times in a row, we are beginning to expect that.
Maybe.
And then the other, the reason Miesha Tate was able to go 3 rounds with Ronda Rousey is because, in my opinion, she's legitimately the second best fighter in the world at that weight class.
Well, she is normally, but she almost lost it in the first round against Sarah McMahon.
But the fact that she got her face broken in that fight in the first round and still won tells you a lot about her talent.
Right, but that's, what you were saying earlier about the Henderson-Cerrone fight where you're not sure about the result. I mean, I could almost call that first round a 10-8 round, so that fight could have been a draw or maybe even a win for McMahon on my book. Miesha Tate got a pretty generous score from the judges, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is debatable, but the fact that she even hung in there, I mean, anybody else gets their orbital bone broken, they're probably done. That's a knockout.
Yeah, she is super duper tough. I said this very same thing when I was talking to Julia Budd about her, that I give her all that respect because very few people are as tough as her to come back from that and still find a way to win.
So who wears the pants in that relationship, her or Brian Stan?
Oh, you mean Brian Caraway?
Brian Stan?
Brian Caraway.
Much bigger guy, Brian Stan.
Yeah.
No, she wears the pants in that relationship. No doubt about it.
I wonder who would win that fight.
Her every time, every day.
Most likely.
All right. Also on UFC 184, Gleison Tibau is replacing Yancy Medeiros. Tibau will be fighting Tony Ferguson. Medeiros' injury, there wasn't really a reason given. It's just like, okay, this replacement's happening. So we don't know what happened there.
Yep.
We may
so
find
we move
out
on.
that it was a drug test.
Oh, don't start. UFC Fight Night 62, Rafael Assunção is out of his fight against Uriah Faber. Assunção's ankle hasn't calcified enough to allow him to have a fight camp, so the fight's off.
He tried to train on it, and it was hurting like a bitch, so he just said, nope, I'm not taking this fight.
Well, and I think that's responsible.
It is. Bellator 135 on March 27th. Francois Carmon against Guilherme Viana, and Dakota Cochran fights Ryan Couture.
Yep, it'll be this
some big names.
Second time for Couture and Cochran, and Couture won his first fight. Cochran lost his first Bellator fight. And the two guys you otherwise mentioned, Viana is from Tough Brazil 3, and Carmont is the former top-ranked welterweight who his nickname was Limitless, and after a few losses, they decided he was limited and cut him.
UFC Fight Night 63, April 4th, Jorge Masvidal and Donald Cerrone wanted to fight each other. Well, that's not going to happen. Masvidal's fighting Ali Aquinta. And also added on that show, Gray Maynard is fighting Alexander Yakovlev. Is that how you say it? Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been added to the show as well. So the Cowboys looking for a fight. Well, might see him in April, but no plans for him yet.
Heard he's fighting in the parking lot of a Winn-Dixie next weekend.
If there's a payday and a referee, probably.
UFC on Fox 15, April the 18th. Takei Mizugaki is replacing Manny Gamburian. Mizugaki fights Aljamain Sterling.
Now, is Gamburian out with an injury?
Not known.
Okay, well, I think it's about time for him to put it on the shelf and call it a day anyway. So if he's injured again, that's probably should be it for him.
Alright, so just got some news and notes before we talk about the Diaz Silva pay-per-view. Gustafsson and Daniel Cormier won't be fighting each other in the next fight, but don't rule out that fight down the road.
Alright, well, nothing to say until it either happens or doesn't.
But that's a good fight, though. I want to see it.
I mean, they eventually are going to have to fight each other unless they each lose to somebody else again and put themselves just out of relevance, which is probably more likely in Gustafsson's case than it is in Cormier's. But, I mean, that fight has to happen down the road.
If Gustafsson wants to get back to the top, he needs to beat Cormier. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, but I honestly, after watching him get pasted last week, I think he's going to have to earn his way to a fight with Cormier at this point.
God, let's hope Rumble Johnson doesn't fail any tests.
Oh, don't start that.
Well, look at his physique. I mean, you might wonder.
Well,
Ryan, go ahead.
You guys could certainly debate this or not, but I mean, with the only test that Rumble Johnson may end up failing is the one against John Jones down the road.
That's true. Peter and I have had that debate, so we won't have it again now.
Right.
Ryan Bader had an interesting idea. He suggests a mini lightweight tournament with himself, Cormier the Mauler, and Rashad Evans.
Well, of course he's going to suggest that because nobody wants to see him fight.
Yeah, that's just an opportunity for him to fight.
Yeah. Misha Tate wants Bitch Korea next.
I like how you pronounce. I like how you pronounce the name now. You say it like she's a female dog.
Well, is it Bache?
It's Bache, not bitch.
I didn't say the latter. I said the former.
It's like Kevin trying to tell me he says Bellator and not Bellator. I hear "tur" every time he says it.
It must be the
I said Bache. Sorry, I already did that one. Daniel Cormier did a funny video for the, was it the World MMA Awards?
Yeah, those were last week.
Look it up on YouTube. It's a remix of the Meghan Trainor All About That Bass called All About That Cake and Chicken. It's pretty funny. Josh Rosenthal will be out of prison next month from his federal marijuana case there.
Yeah, time served plus good behavior.
Yeah, his referee licenses have been lapsed though, so does he go back to reffing mixed martial arts?
I don't know if you want an admitted pot distributor as your oversight official. That's somebody who clearly thought he could get away with the law, now being expected to enforce it in the ring.
Yeah. Coach Sabibi from TriStar Gym has said GSP is looking healthier than he's ever been, but he is unlikely to fight in 2015.
Well, there's a rumor out on the wire that he was offered a fight in July and turned it down.
Well, it depends on the opponent, depends on this and that, but a big money fight with GSP, you gotta think that would fill some seats.
It would, but if he doesn't want it, you can't make him take it.
Incidentally, I just connected two different thoughts that we've talked about in this show now that you brought up GSP. With Silva and his new spate of issues, does that make GSP the default greatest of all time now?
It certainly puts him in the argument as if he wasn't already.
And if that's the case, and he just inherits that moniker now because we found out that Silva's possibly been, and I'm not saying he has been, but the possibility certainly exists now that he's been doing steroids for who knows how long now. Now that his character and credibility are in question, GSP doesn't even have to fight to really earn that moniker, does he?
No.
Silva's legacy has definitely been tarnished.
Although people said the same thing when Hoist Gracie got popped, and Hoist Gracie is still considered a legend. It eventually the tarnish doesn't shine as bright as it did at the time.
Well, and I mean, Alex Rodriguez still has 650 home runs, but so what?
Yeah.
My last note here is Duke Rufus. He said about CM Punk that he's a sponge right now, soaking in everything he's being taught.
Okay, so he's Tarek Safadine Punk.
I think, if he's training with Duke Rufus and his team out there, that's a great camp to be with.
I sort of wonder about that camp these days.
Why is that?
Well, because they've produced exactly one world-class athlete, and that's Showtime Anthony Pettis.
All right. Well, let's move on to UFC 183. And before we start, there was a fight that got pulled from the prelims. Stevie, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Jimmy had his passed out backstage, and they just decided, nope, you're not fighting.
What I read is that he passed out when his fists were getting taped up for the fight, and the doctor cleared him. Basically, he's fine now. And the commission's like, no, the fight's off.
Yeah, the commission usually rules on the side of safety in that one, because they did the same thing with Stefan Struve when he passed out at the last UFC I was at in Vegas. They were like, nope, it doesn't matter. You might be fine now, but the fact that you passed out means you're not fighting tonight.
Frank, do you have any thoughts on the prelim fights?
I really don't. I mean, we've already talked about Misha Tate and Sarah McMahon, so that was really the only fight that stood out to me as being significant.
Yeah, that was actually a pay-per-view fight that ended up on the prelims because she thought she'd get more people to see it if she was the main event of the prelim fights. But I've heard the debate on both sides of that, and if they did 600,000 buys and 2 to 3 people were watching in each household and people went to the bar to watch it, then the pay-per-view she might have had just as big, if not a bigger audience. But apparently they did about 2 million viewers for her fight on the prelims, so it's debatable either way which one would have had a bigger audience, but that was a pay-per-view fight that she purposefully decided to main event the prelims instead.
Well, she's using this as a stepping stone to get back to Ronda Rousey at some point, and like you said, Steve, that result could have, I guess, been debatable either way. But I mean, prelim or main show, either way, she got paid the same, right?
That's true. She's still got the same pay and still benefits from being seen either way, so.
The one fight, or 2 fights on the prelims that caught my eye was Derek Brunson knocking out Ed Herman in 36 seconds. And John Lineker missing weight for the 4th time in 8 fights and still winning his fight.
Yeah, well, he wasn't the only one. Kelvin Gastelum missed weight too, but he didn't benefit from it.
No, and we'll talk about that later because I got some notes about that as well. Moving on to the main card, Thiago Alves beating Jordan Mein in the 2nd round, 39 seconds. Alves was losing that fight. It was 10-9 for Mein after one. Like, Alves came out for the 2nd round, a totally different fighter.
That's what you gotta do when you've been losing a fight for the last 5 minutes. You gotta try something else.
Talsledes beat Tim Boach with a arm triangle choke, 3:45 of the 2nd round. Frank, this choke was in pretty deep.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there wasn't any getting out of that one.
He tried.
Well, he got out of one, and he was too tired after he got out of the first one to get out of the second.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot. I don't know if I think this, but it seems like maybe a lot of people who watch mixed martial arts don't really understand the amount of energy it takes to fight a fight, especially when you get caught like that early. And it takes its toll later on. You know, fighting for 15 minutes is no joke.
Ali Quinta beat Joe Lozon, 2nd round, 3:34 TKO. Big win for him.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's going to move him up in the rankings because he beat a top-notch opponent.
And Frank, your thoughts on Ali Quinta's victory here?
Nothing to add to that.
All right, Tyrone Woodley beating Kelvin Gastelum, 30-27, 29-28, and 28-29. So split decision win there. Woodley moves on. Kelvin missed weight, and it looks like he'll be joining Lineker in the edict by the UFC sorry, you got to move up in weight right now.
Well, it's 4th time for Lineker, 2nd time for Gastelum. They both need to realize that their bodies are not physically able to make the cut that they're trying to.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're looking at this weight division and going, oh, that's my best shot at stardom or what, but you do have to be realistic about your physical limitations. I mean, it always amazed me that Brock Lesnar was able to cut from walking around at 310, 315 down to 265. And I look at these guys that make these unrealistic weight cuts. Look at Rumble Johnson and the cuts that he used to try to make. And now that he's settled in at light heavyweight, he's found his home.
So I find some of the higher the weight, it's easier to drop it. I mean, if you're in 300 territory, you can drop 265. That's probably easier than a light heavyweight cutting to welter.
Yeah, and Johnson's proven that he belongs at light heavyweight, and if he ever tries to cut below that again, he's a moron.
Main event, Anderson Silva beating Nick Diaz 50-45, 50-45, and 49-46. Stevie, did you think Diaz won a single round here?
Yeah, I could give him one of the early rounds, but I do believe Silva dominated him for the whole of the fight.
Frank, you agree?
Yeah, and when Diaz was interviewed after the fight, and he got off that, I thought I won every round blast. I mean, and then we find out later he's hot for marijuana. I can't help but correlate those two things. Clearly, he's smoking something if he thinks he won all 5 rounds against Anderson Silva.
Lidis and Boach won Fight of the Night. Lidis and Alves won Performance of the Night. Gate was 4.5 million, 13,114 fans. We already talked about Lineker and Gastelum weight. Okay, so with Lineker being forced to go up in weight, Demetrius Johnson is in a very precarious position because McCall got beat, so he's not getting the next shot. Of Johnson's 5 title defenses, he's beat the number 1 contender, the number 2 contender, the number 4, the number 6, and the number 9. Number 3 is McCall, he lost. Number 5 is Formiga, but he lost to both Dotson and Benavidez and actually has a partial LCL tear from November, so he won't be fighting anytime soon. Lineker is moving up in weight. The closest one you can make a case for is number 8 at Horiguchi, but he just fought on January the 3rd, and you want to give the number 8 contender a title shot? Probably not. And number 10 is Makovsky. He lost his last fight to the number 5 contender, Formiga. So I would say Formiga's the best shot for the next shot at Demetrius, but if his knee is still buggered, maybe you give Horiguchi a shot because Johnson's beat the rest of the pack here.
Or maybe you bring in a flyweight from another organization that has a really good record that is previously unknown.
I think the flyweight title, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do because if you have a champion that's that dominant, does he stay there or does he advance in weight? Does Johnson go up if everybody put in front of him he's beating?
Well, you do have to remember that Johnson did fight at bantamweight at one point and dropped down to flyweight.
Because he is he's pretty good, and it's no way around that.
Yeah, and, Steve's talking about finding a flyweight outside of UFC that might beat him, because there's certainly not one in the UFC that's going to beat him. And, already he's taken some flack for the entertainment value of his fights, and now he's got literally almost nobody to fight.
I think Formiga's the best shot if his knee can hold up.
Yeah,
but an LCL tear, that's something that's nasty. I mean, the LCL, that's a pretty significant ligament there.
Well, anytime you've got a ligament torn, that's just not good. You don't,
yeah.
I mean, the MCL's not as bad as the ACL, and you can get into that whole thing, but anytime you have a ligament tear in a major joint, especially when it just happened a few months ago, now ain't the time to test it.
Yeah.
All right, well, Peter, I think we're getting about to the cutoff point here for the show.
Well, just one little thing here. Tyrone Woodley actually broke his foot in the first round of his fight. That really shows he manned up and fought rounds 2 and 3 with a broken foot. And we'll end this with this. I'll ask you guys this real quick. Does Anderson Silva just say screw it and retire?
Not if he's publicly denying that he ever failed. He's clearly angling to keep fighting if he's saying things like that.
Right?
Well, you also have the issue of even if it, he's claiming he didn't do it. Okay, I mean, there's nobody guilty in prison, right? But when you look at this, it's like he almost has to fight again now to clear his own name, at least the hard way. I mean, if he can't clear it legally, then he's going to have to go out there and prove that he can win without juicing, because now all of a sudden, every result he's ever had in that octagon is called into question.
True.
Yeah. All right, that's it for the show this week. Frank, you got anything you want to plug?
Not really. I'm just glad to be able to be here. Like I said, this was my debut appearance on Glove Up or Shut Up, and I just appreciate you guys for giving me a forum.
All right, Stevie, what's on tap for Thursday Night AMP?
Jordan hasn't gotten back to me yet, so instead of plugging Thursday Night AMP, I just want to say congratulations to Frank on recently expanding his family, and all the best to him and continued success in his career.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. And I think I may have a future WWE or UFC star on my hands. This child was 11 pounds, 2 ounces, and 23 and a half inches long when he was born 15 days ago.
That's a UFC heavyweight right there.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, congratulations, Frank, and That's going to do it for this week. Thanks, guys, for being on the show. My name's Peter H., Hardcore Canadian. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.